Welcome back to the Edo Lady Traveler's Guide. I'm your Edo Storyteller. In our last episode, we survived a bumpy ride on the Edo taxi, paid the sweaty blood tax of the post stations, and arrived at the massive, terrifying wooden gates of the Sekisho, the border checkpoints. We also uncovered the dark political secret behind these gates. The shogunate's absolute paranoia over fleeing female hostages. Today, we are no longer just looking at the gates from the outside. We are stepping in. In this episode, we will experience the harsh reality of crossing the border. We'll start with permit hell, where you literally have to pay off your debts just to go on a vacation. Then, we will step into a dark examination room to face the legendary and terrifying inspection Crone, who will stop at nothing, even tearing apart your beautiful hair to verify your identity. And finally, we will uncover what drove desperate women to risk crucifixion by hiring midnight smugglers. Take a deep breath and get your papers ready. The inspection is about to begin. Understanding the background of fearing hostage escapes, you'll know why applying for that travel permit, known as Tegada or Kite, was so incredibly difficult. In the best-selling Edo novel, Shank's Mare, there is a very realistic description of this. The main characters are frantically busy before departure. The book says, after preparing the offerings for the temple and paying 100 copper coins out of pocket, we finally received the travel pass. Then we had to rush to the landlord, pay off all our old debts, and only then could we exchange it for a checking point permit. To go on a trip, you first had to prove your background was clean, you had no debts, and that your temple and the landlord were willing to vouch for you. There were many types of permits at the time, like the travel pass that guaranteed your identity, or the seal pass that exempted you from tolls. But for women, the absolute most important one was the Onna Tegata, which means woman's permit. This piece of paper detailed your age, height, facial features, and physical characteristics. According to a checkpoint edict from 1631, those with sword wounds, women, and suspicious individuals shall absolutely not be allowed to pass without a permit. In other words, women were classified at the exact same threat level as suspicious individuals. After struggling to get the permit, you finally arrive at the checkpoint gates. The famous travel guidebook, Ryoko Yojinshu, which means traveler's cautions, specifically warned women waiting until you reach the checkpoint to rummage through your bags for your documents is incredibly rude and dangerous. Please make sure to have your papers ready beforehand at the tea house next door. The inspection begins. You must take off your bamboo hat, and if you are riding in a palanquin, you must open the door to show your face. At this moment, the legendary Aratame-baba, which means inspection Crone, also known as Hitomi Onna, makes her entrance. Because it was inconvenient or considered dirty for high-ranking samurai lords to physically search women. The shogunates hired local older women specifically to inspect female travelers. Here is how the inspection process worked. First, you hand over a permit called the onna tegada. This paper detailed your features so thoroughly it looked like an autopsy report. Name, Hana. Age, 45. Face shape, round. Features, a dark mole above the right eyebrow. A scar on the pinky toe of the left foot. The crone would take you into a small room, compare you to this paper, and check every single item. Then came the most terrifying part. The crone would completely undo your beautifully styled Japanese hairdo and run her fingers through your thick hair. What was she looking for? She was checking if you had hidden secret letters or if you were actually a man in disguise. Some checkpoints even required stricter inspections. While it didn't necessarily mean getting completely naked, undoing your collar and inspecting the features on your chest or thighs definitely happened during certain strict periods. For conservative women at the time, being touched and stared at by strangers brought a sense of shame that was enough to make one break down. How strict was this inspection? Every female, from a 10-year-old girl to a 50-year-old woman, had to have a permit. Even if you were pregnant, passed the checkpoint, and then gave birth to a baby girl at the next inn, you had to ask the innkeeper to issue a certificate proving that this infant was born after you crossed the checkpoint. Without this paper, you couldn't get through on your way back because officials would suspect, did you smuggle a hostage out? The most ridiculous part is that even for a corpse, if it was a female corpse being transported out of the checkpoint, it absolutely needed an onategata. This was the Edo shogunate's obsession. Alive or dead, if it's female, she absolutely cannot pass the checkpoint casually. This high-pressure inspection filled women of that era with anxiety. Let's look at what their actual diaries say. A feudal lord's wife named Ju Xing-yin complained in her diary. In order to pass the Hakone checkpoint, terrified that the government might suddenly issue a travel ban, we waited at the foot of the mountain for 3 whole days, making full preparations before we dared to cross. Another woman, Ito, the wife of an official carpenter, wrote, at the Hakone checkpoint, checking our permits took an incredibly long time. Fortunately, we finally passed safely. Can you feel the tension in those words? Making full preparations before we dared to cross took an incredibly long time. Fortunately, passed safely. Many people at the time were unable to pass safely. If the features on your permit didn't perfectly match your physical appearance, for example, you had an extra mole that wasn't on the ID, you would be detained indefinitely. You might ask, What if my ID says I have no moles, but a mole suddenly grew on my face? Or what if the village head who wrote my ID made a typo? The answer is you were doomed. If your features were even slightly off, you were detained on the spot. You couldn't cross the checkpoint, and you couldn't go home. You could only be placed under house arrest at an inn near the checkpoint. You had to write a letter back home asking your family to reapply for a correct certificate and mail it over. In an era without phones and the internet, this round trip could take weeks. Many poor travelers spent all their travel funds during this waiting process and ended up on the streets or even died of illness at the checkpoint gates. Hearing this, do you feel like that modern passport in your hands has suddenly become quite heavy? Women of the Edo period, whether nobles or commoners, were all swept into this hostage surveillance web, meticulously designed by the shogunate. Through their surviving diaries, we can feel their suffocating anxiety. We saw noble women like Ju Xingyin obediently wait for 3 agonizing days at the foot of the mountain, and commoners like Ito trembling before the inspection Crone, praying just to pass safely. But this brings up a very dark question. What if you didn't pass safely? What if your permit was rejected and you didn't have the money to wait at an inn for weeks? When the official gates are locked tight, how far would a woman go for the sake of her journey? Next episode, we are diving into the dangerous underground world of Edo travel. We will talk about Sekisho Yaburi, the midnight smugglers. We'll follow a female traveler who boldly paid a local guide to navigate secret mountain paths in the dead of night and uncover the tragic story of 2 young sisters who paid the ultimate price for their freedom. Before we wrap up, I want to specifically let everyone know that the content of every single episode of the Edo Lady Traveler's Guide is the crystallization of my hard work, painstakingly researched by reading a massive amount of specialized books, academy papers, and ancient documents by Japanese scholars. I hope to pass on the warmth of this history to you in the most relaxing way possible. If you like the stories I've put together, please subscribe to the Edo Lady Traveler's Guide, leave a 5-star review, and share the show with even more friends. This is the greatest encouragement in the world for an Edo storyteller like me. I'm your Edo storyteller, and I will see you next time. Bye!